So in days of old, when knights were bold and ladies wore no knickers, you had trouble getting rid of your wife. Once you got married, you were stuck for life. But you had one thing on your side. A wife was chattel. She was no different from a cow, a sheep, or a horse. In lots of counties, a wife was called a mare. You could take your wife to market, and you could sell her. But the thing is, your wife had to be, obviously, agreeable to this. So why did it come about? Well, the long and short of it was marriage was an ass. And if you were stuck for life, which is what happened, there was no way to get divorced, absolutely nada nilch. And the only way you could do it was by this. And it really worked mainly for working people, but it did go into the middle classes, and in some occasions it went even higher up the scale. But it started really due to clandestine marriages, which took place in London, and it really meant that a woman could be snapped off the street and married, and all her possessions would belong to the man. And it gave no power. Women had so little agency in this game, and they were so stuck once married. Then came along the Hardwicke Act of 1753, which did sort of sort things out, but not enough. And so what you would do, you had to have a place to sell your wife. You maybe had to announce you were going to sell her. That did help. So you'd get a bellman to go round and say, you know, I've got this woman, and I'm selling my wife today. And you were really, you wanted to get a big audience. There wasn't a great deal of money in it, but you sometimes could prove lucky. It happened in markets, it happened in towns, and the reason why it happened was because it was so darn expensive to get divorced. Divorce in these days didn't really exist. And so before 1857, the cost and complexity of this was enormous. It took 3 stages, and only really at the end of the day, 12 couples managed to get divorced a year, which is, I think, quite extraordinary. And the price of this marriage, are we going to go, mate? Oh, yeah. No, we're doing this, I see. Well, I had to do something in the afternoon. So here we are. Now we get the curtains. Oh, thanks. Now, I think the words do come up. So you did have to have the court, and you had, when you managed to get, you had no rights to remarry, which really sort of ruined everything. And so sale had to be a public declaration, and then it had its own rituals. And one of the things I really loved, it was like, if divorce, if marriage, if the law is an ass, we know where to put the ass's tail. And that's how it was felt about marriage in those days. So the cost of getting divorced was £700 to £1,000, which when you take into account the skilled earned worker earned £40 to £50 a year, and a non-skilled labourer 20 to 30, it was like your entire life's savings would go to get this divorce. It was absolutely no point. And also, things weren't really on your side. In 1815, after the Battle of Waterloo, many men returned home to find their wives had remarried. So it was a little bit of a problem here. And one sailor remembers coming back from being 3 years away and deciding to go home to see his wife, and finding her with a child that wasn't his, and a husband by the fire that wasn't him. And he said, well, what are we going to do about this? And the man said, well, you know, I'm quite keen on this woman. Now we've got a kid together. And he said, well, I'm not very keen on this. I've come home for 3 days. I want to be with my wife. So the wife said, I've got an idea. Why don't I be the seafaring wife when you're home, and then he can become the landlord when you've gone away. And this is how they solved the problem. And they decided they'd keep all the children that this sort of ménage à trois brought about. All these wives' sales had songs and hymns and sort of ballad sheets that went with them. And I found one that I really loved, and I hope I can, apart from breaking news, I've now just got to get myself into this. I knew this would happen when I got to, here we are.
What's the breaking news?
Well, it's nothing very interesting, I'm afraid, so here we are. Okay, I'm going to do it that way, thank you very much. Okay. Attend to my ditty, you frolicsome folk, and I'll tell you a story, a comical joke. 'Tis a positive fact that I'm going to unfold concerning a woman who by auction was sold. A carpenter lived not a mile from here, and being a little or too fond of his beer, and being hard up for brass, 'tis true on my life, for 10 shillings by auction, he sold off his wife. The husband and wife, they could never agree, for he was too fond of going out on a spree. They settled the matter without more delay, so tied in a halter, he took her away. He sent round the bellman announcing the sale, all in a haymarket, and that without fail. The auctioneer came, and with his hammer so smart, and the carpenter's wife stood up in a cart. Now, she was put up without grumble or frown. The first bid was a tailor that bid ½ a crown. Says he, I'll make her a lady so spruce, and fatten her well on cabbage and goose. 5 and 6 and 3 farthings, a butcher then said. That doesn't help. 6 and 10, said the barber with his curly head. Then up jumped a cobbler and said he, in 3 cracks, I'll give you 9 shillings and 2 balls of wax. Just look at her beauty, the auctioneer cries. She's mighty good-tempered and sober besides. Damn me, said a sailor, she's 3 out of 4. At 10 shillings I'll bid for her, but not a screw more. Thank you, sir, thank you, said the bold auctioneer. Going for 10? Is there nobody here will bid any more? Is it not a bad job? Going, I say. She's gone for 10 bob. A hammer was struck that concluded the sale. The sailor, he paid down the brass on the nail. They sent for the fiddler, the piper to play, and they danced and they sung until the break of day. Then long may he flourish and prosper through life, the sailor who bought the carpenter's wife.
Whoa! Whoa!
This is, So now we get to this sweet lady, and she did rather well. She was brought to market. Oh, sorry, I haven't got the right bloody speaker. No, it's all right. I've got it. I'm going to do it this way. I'll stand here. It's okay. Thank you very much. She was brought to market by a very drunk and abusive husband, and an earl saw her and thought, "Oh my word, she is such a beauty," that he went and bought her. But the trouble was, he was already married, which is always a little handicap on this situation. But never mind, he thought what he'd do is he'd educate her and he'd try and get her to have a better life. And fortunately, having got her educated and taken her as a mistress, his wife then died. And she actually ended up as a duchess. So she was really successful in the old marriage mark. Unfortunately, she didn't live very long. So after having had the happy ending, she conked it, which was somewhat sad. Then we get to, let's see what we get to next. Oh, yes. So there were many, many examples of this that didn't go terribly well, and there's some what I really like. So one of these is rather barbaric. So this is, bought away on Sunday, brought her home on Monday, beat her well on Tuesday, sick she was on Wednesday, died she did on Thursday, buried she was on Friday, and now I'll buy another. And there was also a lot of not great success in this, where women were sold and then would go back to their husbands, or the husbands rather regretted having sold the wife in the first place. But what made it more interesting, I think, is that the church did not get involved in this. And on the whole, magistrates turned a blind eye because they realized how impossible this situation was for the working man. We go to this. So this is called the Smithfield Bargain. And this was quite a famous sort of, it became a play in Haymarket. And there was a rather wonderful line that said, you know, when I met her, she was so thin, I could put my arm around her, and she was an angel. But now I can't get to her by a barnyard. And I just thought, so when you came to sell your wife, gentlemen, just in case you ever think of doing this, you have to come up with all her really good qualities. So they would say things like, you know, she's good at cooking, good at sewing, she can swear like a trooper, and she can fight like a man. Well, that was a winner. And apparently, being good looking wasn't really anything to be very proud of. Could she plough a field? I just love that, you know. No, don't worry about looks. Just let's see if she can plough a field. Then we have this, I like this. This came later on. But this was their murdering ways. And this is a man, and there were a few of these, who made quite a lot of money. And he would sell his wife to the highest bidder at a local fair. Don't get overexcited. You could go for an ox, but that was worth 6 guineas, so he'd done all right. And then she would wait until her purchaser was asleep. One doesn't know what else she got up to with him. And then she'd kill him and steal all his money. And they were very successful, but they weren't alone in their scheming ways. Then we get to the Mayor of Casterbridge. Now, the Mayor of Casterbridge becomes quite interesting. It's written by Thomas Hardy, and it was seen as a complete outrage when he wrote it. And I bring this up because my book, Bridestone, I wanted to base it on a wife sale. And I thought, oh no, I can't. I bet it's just old Thomas Hardy making this up. But no. He borrowed it from George Borrow, who wrote The Romany Way. And George Borrow bought his wife at a wife sale. And the Victorians were absolutely outraged at this. They thought it was completely, it didn't happen. And it had to be shown that it did happen. And the book didn't do terribly well, which I find really extraordinary, as it's now considered to be one of his masterpieces. But he sells his wife, and as he says in this brutal bit about how he sees her, I think it does sum it up rather well. Then we get to me. I decided to write this book, Bridestone, and I decided that I would really needed to have a wife sale. And this is where it became quite interesting, because you think you need something, and then you think, is it really real? Is this really possible? And I was delighted to discover I was correct on all my history, which is always a bit worrying in case you aren't. And I am going to finish by reading you a little bit of the wife sale that I wrote. Now, I've abridged this quite a bit, so there will not be any, it's not too long. And it's the main character of this book is a man called Duval. And Duval he's just been released from a French prison, and he's come back to England. And the date is 1796, which was the height of wife sales, absolutely the height. And he has 2 days, 7 hours to find himself a wife. And he has had no luck, and he goes to market to buy a horse. And he hears of a wife sale. And this is it. A large gentleman in an ill-fitting riding jacket strode into the middle of the room. The jacket was red, his face was red, and his nose was redder. The only thing distracting from the redness of his features were his ample whiskers. He carried with him a wooden half-barrel that he upended and placed in the centre of the floor. Then, with some difficulty, he stepped up onto it. This was the ringmaster. "Gentlemen, we are here so that harassed husbands and wretched wives might, through consensual dissolving of their marriage, have a chance to bring about a happier union. We have 5 husbands and 1 son, and the son is here to sell his recently widowed wife of his late father." A drunken man led a woman into the centre of the room by a neck scarf. "Mr. Orderly," he said to the red-faced man on the barrel, "Mr. Orderly, I am here," he hiccuped, "to sell this woman my spare rib. Sir, the floor is yours." The man carefully stayed upright, lest the floor knock him unconscious. He leaned on his wife, who was much taller, broader, and altogether more ferocious looking than her husband. "Get on with it, man," said Mr. Orderly. The husband straightened himself. "She can cook, clean, better than many." And here he was lost for words, which produced gales of laughter. "But I do not need her now, preferring my own company to that of the moon-eyed hen whose tongue refuses to lie still. She is a woman with 2 stomachs and sharp teeth, and anyone who wants her is—" He stopped, remembering one thing that might help with the sale. "She is hungry for the bed and wants a child that she hasn't yet had." "Do I have a bidder?" interrupted Mr. Alderley. "Yes, sir, 4 shillings. "Any advance on Shaw 4 shillings? "No. Going, gone." She was sold to a man she knew who was delighted with his purchase, as was she, and the 3 of them went off to settle the matter. So that is a very good eye-opener into what happened in these events. But afterwards, after you had bought your wife, you then had to come to an agreement. That's the last wife sale. But you had to come to an agreement because it wasn't over. You could buy the wife, and then all you, the wife, and the 2 men would have to go off and settle the matter. And how that was done was in a pub over a lot of wine, and then you'd have to agree to take on all the children, or maybe you'd want to keep one of the children yourself. That had to be negotiated. And that any child she was carrying would be your child. So it was quite an elaborate process to sort of seal it all up and have it done. And they often turned into very merry evenings, and I should imagine a very big hangover the next day, in which the wife no doubt wonders what the heck she's done. But the thing that I really found shocking about it, the first wife sale was sort of recorded or known about in 1073, and the official recording of it was in 1633. But the interesting thing is when it ended. And I found that the most shocking bit about all this. And I'm beginning to wonder if it really ever did end. So this is the time of the last wife sale, which is 1932. And it happened in Smithfield Market. There is a plaque to say what the wife was sold here. 1932. Ladies, listen to that. It's a pretty terrifying thing.